watched the tape probably more than once. When you look back at just why the run game didn't seem to click, was it just something they were doing? Do you see an execution portion of that for you guys?
Combination of things. I think the scheme could have been better from a coaching standpoint. Certainly the timing, some of the calls would like to have back, and then there's definitely an execution piece to it. They have good players, they have good schemes, so it was a big challenge for us. And unfortunately, I thought they got the better half of us in that area of the game. Throughout that game.
Last week you talked about how the run game opened up so much for the pass game. This week, flip side, what did it do to the pass game not being able to get the run game going?
Yeah, I think certainly it makes it a little easier on those linebackers when they feel like those runs aren't hitting. They don't have to react quite as hard. But I think there were still some things that came open in the passing game. Thought we had some good stuff up and gave us the opportunity to score some points. And then again, there's always going to be some calls or execution that we want back. But for the most part, it's certainly when you can make us one-dimensional, it changes the game a little bit.
Yesterday in the running game especially, like you're kind of waiting for that one to pop in the run game, but it just didn't happen. What goes into that? Is that also just a combination of things?
Yeah, and certainly at the end of the game, it's time and score. It's a number of possessions left in the game, and the reality of time on the clock, kind of sets in, and you can't stick with it at times because it's like, all right, we might only have 2 possessions. It's a 2-score game. We got to go 90 yards to make it a 1-score game. We don't have the time to stick with the run, continue to call those calls. I think that's a big part of it, so I think that's something that we got to continue to look at, and that's why it's so important to get points early in those games to try to stay in it a little bit closer.
Did you feel like, Drew, that you had a good plan for the second half coming out of the locker room?
I did. I felt really good about it. I think we were moving the ball there that first drive, and I thought we had some good stuff up, and certainly there's going to be a call or two or a scheme that I want back, but for the most part, felt really good about it walking back on the field.
How would you evaluate how Jackson did sliding to our right tackle?
I thought he competed, really well. Obviously, it's an elite player that lined up on his side most of the game. His communication, his understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, I think is really good, and I think it allows him to be effective in that role. So I was really pleased to see that.
Have you had to have all the different right tackles impacted anything that you want to do in terms of, hey, I got a little bit different of a guy in there? I know they all have to be ready to play, but every player is a little bit different. Does that impact kind of how you look at what you're calling or how you might do something?
Yeah, certainly. I think how we formate the game plan, how we want to do certain things in both the run and the pass game, it's going to change things. That could be based on our personnel or their personnel. I think that's always something we have to stay aware of. And as you said, each player that's going to go in there or has been in there has a little bit of a different skill set, so we have to be mindful of that as we put it together.
Why do you think Jackson was able to neutralize Hutchinson so well?
I think a lot of it's his preparation. He's one of those guys, we talk about a number of guys in that room that, they never are, surprised by the opportunity, if that makes sense. They're preparing for it, they're ready for it, and when the opportunity comes, they're going to make the most of it. So it wasn't like he had 4 days, oh, God, I got to get ready to play right tackle. I was like, no, I know how to play right tackle in this offense. I know what's expected. I'm going to study the tape, make sure that I understand what's coming, what the game plan is, and I think that kind of speaks to him being a pro and being ready for that opportunity.
How much help was there given to him? I know it's not all the time, but how much was that done, and how much does that impact some of the things you do in the offense when you are giving some help?
It goes both. I mean, certainly, regardless who is at right tackle with that guy over there, you're going to have to give that player help. I mean, he certainly warrants that. I think it's a balance because there's also the ways that you want to affect coverage or affect other areas of the game plan that are important. So that, as coaches, is really something that we spend a good portion of the week making sure that we try to find that right balance where, hey, this player is not going to wreck the game, but we also got to make sure that we are trying to be explosive in other areas and make plays to go score points.
I know you were talking.
Found that balance?
I mean, certainly we didn't score enough points to win the game. So I think that speaks to coaching at the end of the day. And I said this to the offense: anytime we don't accomplish our goal of winning, I'm gonna look at myself first and say, hey, where can I be better? What can I do better? So that's the first mindset. But yeah, at the end of the day, no.
I know you were just talking about how time and score dictates a lot down the stretch. When you came, and I think the number was the last 18 plays were called passes. In the moment, do you realize it's like that, or do you go back and you're like, oh wow, we ended up doing this and
every game's different from that somewhat. And that game I definitely knew because I knew time on the clock when we went to kind of a 2-minute mindset. Doesn't mean we're not going to run the ball in a 2-minute mindset if we get the right look or we kind of hit these, different things come up during the drive. But yeah, I think there's something I was pretty aware of and kind of, knew we had to do if we were going to give ourselves a chance to get back in the game.
Through 3 games, where can you see Kyler's comfort in this offense come through?
I think just in and out of the huddle. Like if you look at just the operation from time on the play clock when we're breaking the huddle, time when we're snapping the ball. Knock on wood, I don't think we've taken a timeout on offense. Those are the type of things. I mean, look, we're shifting and motioning, we're checking plays. You see him communicating at the line of scrimmage, I think, at a really high level. So I think those are the things that show me that he's very comfortable in what he's doing, what we're doing. So that's been good to see.
The game plan obviously included a lot of deep shots against man coverage. A lot of them looked like they were close to coming off. Why, in your mind, did they not generally come off?
A combination of things. I think, and a lot of that, as you said, it's not necessarily we're calling a deep shot. We're calling a play, and the coverage is going to dictate where the ball goes. And sometimes that's down the field, sometimes it's underneath. But for the most part, I thought Kyler did, the ball went where it should. And sometimes we got to put the ball in a better place. Sometimes we got to make the play physically. And sometimes I got to have some better scheme up. I think it's a combination of those three things that lead to better execution and a better performance.
How would you break down the play that he ultimately threw the interception on? Like, did you feel like that was, you talk about the ball needs to go where it needs to go. Was that where it needed to go, and how do you kind of?
Yeah, I think it's always, and I've said this to him, like it's always easy when I have the clicker in my hand to pause and be like, hey, don't do that. I think it's a lot harder in the moment when the bullets are flying and he's got to make a quick decision based on what he sees the coverage to be. So, based on the result of the play, we're always going to say, hey, this is what we could have seen differently. This is what we could have done differently. But at the same point, to me, it's always about give me your thought process, tell me what you were thinking, and then we'll go from there. I think that's always the mindset on anything like that, because it's so easy in a pause moment and no stress to say, hey, well, this is why we could have done this or that.
He said after the game that he just said, he goes, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, again, he's also doing hindsight. When a guy, I'm assuming he kind of had the same reaction when you first talked to him about it. So do you kind of like, is it about then patting him on the back and saying, don't worry, you'll get it next time? Is there more conversation about the play itself? Or is it, okay, he understands it was a mistake and now we're going to just totally wipe it?
In the moment, a lot of times it's move on, because like the chance of me calling that exact play again are not high. Plus, with so it's like we're moving on to what's coming up. Here's the coverages. Here's the calls. Here's where our mindset is. After the fact, it's going to be more of like a hey, all right, we agree that that's not the decision we want, but like where were your eyes? What was your thought process? So that way we can change that part of it. I think to make sure, hey, are we putting our eyes in the right places? Our mindset correct based on the situation and the call.
What's the reaction when you're like, hey, now that the clicker's in my hand, it's much easier for me to tell you not to do that, like.
I think he appreciates that. I think you have to have that honesty as a coach. Like it's one thing for me to say something like I'm not back there with the ball in my hand getting rushed and getting tackled. So I think that reality and understanding between a coach and a player, really in every room, is very important. Like what we want to have happen, what we coach, what we see is not always identical to the way it feels on the field. And I think it's important to have those conversations and to make sure that you're communicating with your players to have that understanding.
How much on that play do you think was the decision, or was it also a little bit that it just was thrown just a tad short?
Probably a little both. Absolutely.
When you look ahead to Washington now this week, and you've got a third or fourth string offensive tackle, Trey McBride's in concussion protocol, how does that change your game plan or scheming throughout the week?
It doesn't really change our process. I think, as we've talked about in this room, I know a number of times, like injuries are a part of this game. It's unfortunate, but it's real. So you're going to take the group that you're going to the game with. You're going to try to put the best plan together for the guys that you're going to attack. And I think that's going to be our mindset regardless of who's healthy, who's not. And I don't think that changes.
How much of the prep for this is affected by the fact that they played last night instead of on Sunday?
Very little. Yeah, almost none.
Did you watch the game?
Game was on in the background. It's in our system. Late last night, can kind of peek at it, watch it again this morning. So, but we have certainly a number of games on them and that staff over the years to kind of look at and go off of.
What's your impression on what they've done, especially these last two games well, that's more on offense, I guess, but overall on defense.
And having played Dan, for a number of years in different spots that he's been throughout his career, I have a ton of respect for him, his system, the way he coaches, the identity of his team. So, I do think it's going to be a challenge for us this week.
We've talked a lot, I feel like, about the negative things Kyler did, but he had some nice plays. What were your favorite things he did on Sunday?
I love the touchdown pass. No, I think overall, again, there's going to be plays he wants back. That's going to be true in a great performance. It's going to be true in a game we lose. But I think overall, I thought, he made some explosive plays in the passing game. I thought he extended some plays, made some plays with his feet, which is really good in the run game. So I think he gives us a great chance to win and really happy with where he's at. And certainly we're always going to try to find that next level.
People argue with how much he's been running through 3 games.
Yeah, pretty comfortable. I think at the end of the day, he's going to do what he feels like is best to go win the game. I think he does a great job of protecting himself. Like he rarely gets tackled even when he's running with the football. So as long as we can keep it that way, I'm not overly concerned with how much he's carrying the ball.
In the case of back shoulder passes, and in this, thinking of Kyler and Marvin in this case, but just generally, like, is that just a question of time on task between two players? Is there more that goes into it to have those kinds of plays be successful?
I think it's time on task, as you said. We hit one backed up coming out in the LA game, so it's not something I'm overly concerned about one way or the other.
In 2 of the 3 games, you guys have struggled a little bit in the second half at Buffalo Sunday here. What do you attribute that to? Is it just you're playing a good defense? Is it scheme? What is it?
Probably a combination of both. I think at the end of the day, as you said, like those are 2 really good defenses that, in critical situations, you're going to have high leverage plays that are high variance plays. And, in certain instances, we made those plays, and in others we didn't. And, in those 2 games, we didn't make enough to get over the hump, which is really our goal. But I think it's a combination of the 2.
What was a disappointment, certainly with the lack of production on 3rd down, and a bunch of them were manageable, but just plays weren't made for whatever reason.
Yeah, that is not our goal, obviously. We need to be better in that area. I think as we talked about it as coaches and talk with the players, the day after the game, it's a combination of scheme and kind of some little details of just understanding what we're getting, where we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to do things. I think if we can clean some of those things up, I think we can execute at a much higher level in those areas.
You mentioned kind of some nice plays Kyler made with his legs. Is that also a thing that becomes harder as the opponent is not guarding against the running back run as much?
I don't think it changes drastically. I think his skill set is so unique from that standpoint that people think they're taking it away, and then all of a sudden he's breaking 1 for 30, or they're selling out on the quarterback and we're giving it to the running back. I think that's a balance that our running game, makes that running game hard to defend overall.
What have you seen from Elijah over the last year, and now especially that there might be the possibility of having a bigger role depending on what happens with Trey the rest of the week?
Talking Higgins? Similar to where Trey was a year ago. I think he played receiver in college, has transitioned into the tight end room. I think he's embraced and learned a ton from Trey. They're, very similar players in a lot of ways. But I think just every rep he's gotten, he's learned from. So you see that kind of in year 2, the comfort level he has in the offense, in the role, in the job, I think is really kind of developed over time. It's why you see him continuing to get more time even these last 3 games.
What does a Dan Quinn defense look like to you? What do you sense with you? Said you've been against him a number of times.
I think they're extremely sound and they play really, really hard. I think that's always kind of their calling card. It's a very disciplined group. I think they take the game very seriously. They finish plays really high level. They play with a ton of energy. That's kind of who he is as a coach, and I think his units really have always been warranted that.
When we talked to Clayton Adams a week or 2 ago after practice, he was talking about the tight ends blocking and how that was pairing well with his group, and he said part of that reason was tight ends are coached to block with pride. As a coach, how can you pick up on that with your eyes? What differences can you see of that's part of the reason the tight ends in the offensive line are working so well in the blocking is because they want to?
I think that's a huge part of run game execution is about want to. It's about effort and willingness, especially, the O-line, it's their number 1 job. So you're not playing the position if that's not something you love to do and take a ton of pride in. In the tight end room, depending on the offense, your role in that could be greater in one offense than the other. Certainly, we ask those guys to do a lot in the run game. And really, they wouldn't be on the field if they didn't take a ton of pride in that role in a lot of ways. But I think you see that in them celebrating the success of their teammates, in celebrating a big run, in celebrating a great block, in the enjoyment that they get from that, because it should be celebrated. One of the things that we preach in the room a lot is you need to celebrate the success of your teammates in the run game, in the pass game. I think that's a big part that makes this game fun and special to play. And I think that's where you see that from those guys kind of visibly, that they take pride in that, aside from their willingness and execution doing it.
Obviously, the goal is to get into the end zone, but is there a comfort level as a play caller knowing you have somebody like Matt Prater that could kick it from deep?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, certainly, we're in field goal range a lot sooner than other teams at times. And that, as a play caller, it certainly changes the dynamic of how you operate in certain situations. But, his ability is impressive, and it certainly helps us as a team, as an offense.